Because most often when I look back from a year ago, I'm doing something now that I never thought I would be doing. And that's the really cool thing about this career is that there's so much that's possible.
At 7 years old, she walked out of a veterinary clinic and wondered, can this experience be better? Her veterinary career has been the answer to that question. Dr. Lily Chen found her career mission at age 7, standing in a cramped, stressful animal hospital in Taiwan, watching her dog shake with fear and thinking, does it have to be this way? That question has never left her. Born in Taiwan, Lily immigrated to the United States at age 13, knowing minimal English, attended a unique boarding school with an accredited zoo, and went on to earn her veterinary degree from UC Davis. She built her clinical foundation in busy, high-pressure hospitals in Los Angeles, from emergency medicine to general practice, before a long-time beloved black lab patient named Lucy changed everything. Searching for more options to support her patients, Lily discovered acupuncture, herbal medicine, microbiome science, and a root cause approach to healing that has since transformed how she practices, how she thinks, and how she shows up for every patient and family that walks through her door. Today, Dr. Chen runs an integrative practice in Los Angeles where most of her patients come in healthy, not sick, and where hour-long appointments allow her to be a genuine partner to the families she serves. And we didn't use these terms. The way she practices beautifully demonstrates the collaborative care and contextualized care models in constant conversation these days. And while we talk about what she has learned from a medical perspective, what leaves me in awe the most about our conversation is Dr. Lily's mindset. Lily talks about practicing presence, inviting pet families to focus on what's possible right now. She also approaches each year with a genuine curiosity, looking back and marveling at the things she's learned and done that she never would have predicted 12 months earlier. And she has found a place in her career, through the long and winding road it took to get there, where she wakes up on a Sunday genuinely energized for the week ahead. I'm so excited to share this episode with you, so let's get to the conversation with Dr. Lily Chen. I got to listen to the early episodes from your own podcast, and so I was able to hear a little bit of your early veterinary beginnings. You're one of the early identifiers. You knew you liked animals from a young age, but you were also born and spent several years of your childhood in Taiwan. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you grew up and how you were around animals and started to develop that love.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Megan. It's super fun to sit down and have this conversation. Yes, born and raised in Taiwan until I was 13. And I can remember as early as 3 years old that my grandma used to live in a pretty rural side of town. And I remember there was a mountain trail right in the backyard of her house. And we would take walks every morning. And I would remember that I would see critters. And sometimes if we encounter stray dogs or even kittens, I would just want to bring them home. And I did. It's just about in my very early childhood, I remember that I would bring them home. We would have them for a couple of days and they would kind of disappear. I should have asked my grandma what happened to them. But my grandma also loved animals. You know, we would get these baby birds and we would raise them. And I remember little ducklings, little chicks, little like those water turtles, all kinds of different creatures, even like little mice. And we would raise silkworms, all sorts of things. And I just remember that part of my childhood. And I think my family always knew that I would go into something animal related. And I think by 6 or 7 years old, I told my family that I would want to one day own a animal hospital.
Oh, own an animal hospital. So that's another level of knowledge.
I think I said, and my parents told me this because I actually don't remember exactly when I said it, but they said yes. When you were 6 and 7, we had a dog back then, and we took her to an animal hospital. And it was very sterile. And I just remember, even in early age, it didn't smell very good. It was very cramped. There are lots of animals, lots of people, and everyone was like worried and stressed. And I felt like my dog was shaking and she was really scared. And I came home and I said, one day I feel like an animal hospital should not feel like a hospital, should feel like a home. Animals should be comfortable. People should not be stressed. Like I was stressed because I saw my dog scared. And it's like, why does it have to be like that? So it was really interesting because I almost forgot that part. But I felt like my whole journey was about coming home to that 7-year-old girl who wanted to start something and creating a healing space where animals, when they come to get care, they don't have to be scared.
I am so impressed because sometimes that might deter people. They'd be like, ew, this is not fun. I don't want to do this. And yet you saw this and like, I can make this better. Like, why can't this be better? And so to me, that just speaks volumes of how you look at things, even from an early age. So what was it like coming to a new country when you were like 13 is also a really rough age. What was that like transitioning?
Looking back, I think that it was such a, like you said, it was a very interesting age because 13, you're just coming into your teenagehood and you're still trying to figure out yourself. And then you're thrusted into this whole new culture. I spoke a little bit of English, but not really, right? So I had to learn the language from the get-go. And I was in upstate New York where it was really a very, very different kind of setting than what I was used to. Because in Taiwan, I was more of a city girl, but upstate New York is also countryside, New England, like very pretty, but I wouldn't say rural, suburban maybe. But people were very, very nice though. I just remember coming in and for the first time in my life, not knowing what to do at all with anything because I didn't even know how to take a school bus to school. I didn't know how to talk to people. And I didn't know what my teachers were saying. And, I had a little translator I would take with me every day, and every word I had to look up. And you just start to build that. But for the first couple years, really, I was very, very quiet because one, I didn't know the language, of course, right? And two, I was just trying to find out who I am as a 13-year-old girl and trying to deal with this move and the culture shock and all of that. And I think that that's changed me fundamentally in ways now when I look back, because before I came to this country, I actually was very outspoken, very extroverted, and loved public speaking. And when I came here, because I didn't speak the language the first time, didn't know how to do school, right? I was always pretty good at school, but now like everything is in a foreign language. And I think my confidence was crushed a bit, but I did have the determination to figure it out. I just didn't have the tools quite yet. And those years have, I think, transformed me in a way to be more of a reflective person that I wasn't the first person to talk about something, voice my opinion, or raise my hand in class and ask a question. Even if I did have a question, I've learned to be quite introverted and reflective. And I would think a lot before I speak because one initially was really trying to find the right words. But that carried a lot through those years and beyond. But I also learned during that process, I worked harder. I had to work harder than everyone else if I wanted to be successful, right? If I wanted the grade I wanted, if I wanted to make the friends I wanted, if I wanted to understand the world around me. So I think those years also taught me a lot of about grit and determination. So not very easy years, I think, between the ages 13 to 18. Hard, but I was surrounded by really, really kind people who gave me a lot of grace and patience and very important people in my life in that period as well.
That can be crucial to help us no matter what situation we're in. But I mean, as most people who have gone through veterinary training can attest to, it takes some grit to get there and to get through it as well. So while it doesn't make it easy when you're going through it, maybe in hindsight, we can appreciate it for some extent. So, did you ever waver from your thoughts of working with animals? What was your thought going through high school and college?
No, so the cool thing about my high school was that it had a zoo in it. I'm not going to a boarding school. It had a accredited zoo attached to it. I think it's like the only high school that had that. So I guess throughout high school, that was my escape, you know. I could go in and the animals were a lot of them because they were bred in captivity. They were raised with people and we would have different jobs, right? You could sign up for community service, so you could go feed in animals and all of that. And many of them you could kind of go in and hang out with them. Like I remember I would go into the lemur cages and just hang out with them and the red panda. And those are really, really fun memories. And I think if anything, those were the years where I really solidified my love and what I wanted to do with my career. So I don't think I ever wavered.
That is really cool. Not everybody is super jealous of you. So I mean, you got all this experience with different types of species. So when you went into vet school, did you think small animal, or did that change at all through vet school? What do you think you would do?
I originally went to vet school, wanted to be a zoo vet or exotics because I did work with so many different species and animals, and I thought that would be the coolest job in the world until I found out how competitive and scarce those jobs are, especially if you want to be a zoo vet. There's only so many zoos in the whole country, and just practicality, I'm like, I don't think that's going to work for me to just have to pick up and move anywhere where there's an opening, right? And also, I don't know if I could just do that and not do dogs and cats because companion animals still have my heart. So I focus on dogs and cat companion animal care, but I also did take quite a bit of classes in exotics because I have thought that would be kind of a complementary way to learn and still be able to treat different species. Did end up focus on exotics, mostly because those opportunities didn't arise early in my career. I still have a love for them, so we'll see what happens in life.
And you're in California, so who knows what people have as pets? Which, we started in New York and then you went to vet school at UC Davis.
Mm.
How did you get from one end to the other of the country?
Taiwan is a very tropical island. That's how I grew up, right? And being in the drops in New York, it was beautiful with the seasons, but gosh, the winters were so rough. I I knew before senior year in high school, I'm like, I need to get out to somewhere warmer. So when I started applying for colleges, I got the UC application. So University of California has one application where you can check off all the campuses. And then just remember I checked off every single one of them. And just send it off and be like, I'm going to California. I yes, I did end up attending UCLA. So I was in Los Angeles and then went to UC Davis for vet school and then came back to LA ever since. So California's home. I think it's hard for me being in a climate that doesn't have that much sun. So I love being in California, and that's kind of how I ended up with that move from New York to California.
Well, knowing a little bit about your journey, so right out of vet school, you became an associate veterinarian for a VCA hospital. And so, what was it like going from vet school student to actually practicing?
Yeah, so I actually was at an internship after, well, and it was a VCA, it was VCA West LA. So really big hospital, really big specialty hospital. And I would not want to repeat that year. However, I am really, really grateful for that year. I think it set me up for the pace and also being able to think on my feet and really trained me for communication with clients because West LA has the kind of clientele that really demanded a lot from you, right? And first year out being in that situation where you're taking in like the walk-ins, the emergency, the overnights, the surgeries, you have to learn really, really quick. So I'm really grateful that was my first year because it did make the subsequent years when I did get into my GP practices that I felt I was prepared for. So by the time I made it to my first job out of internship, it was also a really busy hospital. And my colleagues were very experienced. So in that hospital, they were at that time, I would have been the fourth doctor. There were three doctors there already, and they've been there a long time. And I would watch them work and how they work up their cases, how they do their charts, how they talk to clients. And I learned a lot in that process and being able to kind of keep up with that pace. I remember there are days where you would be fully booked for appointments. I believe it was every 20 minutes back then. And I would have emergencies rolling and there would be CPR on one table and a heat stroke on another, plus keeping up with appointments. And that was the pace that I I was in a hospital for 7 years before I moved on. So looking back, I can see why that's not really sustainable for any doctors. But I think it did build a very strong foundation and appreciation for many people doing the kind of work that involves urgent care, emergencies, walk-ins, all of that. But I think those years also showed me that it isn't really a great environment for the owners or the doctors or the veterinary professional, the staff, anybody, because everyone usually in that situation is highly stressed, highly emotional. And I learned later on in my career now, I feel that there is a different path because a lot of the medicine I was practicing was very reactive, right? People waited until the animals are sick and then they come rolling in. And now everyone is stressed. And now there is a lot of time constraints on we have to do something quickly to stabilize the animal, to get them feeling better. And then talking to the owner sometimes about those very difficult subjects of what if your animals is diagnosed with something really terminal? What do we do? Or if they need surgery right away or emergency treatment that costs a lot of money and it's not something they can afford, how to navigate those situations. And I feel that even though I learned a lot from that experience, some of the most important thing that it taught me now is being able to maybe design a system where you're not doing that all the time. I certainly think that there are always going to be emergencies and accidents. But I also saw that a lot of the things I was seeing, we may have a better way to prevent them if we are a bit more proactive. So it's very interesting the kind of the trajectory of my journey was internship. It was so, specialty, emergency, all the most complicated, the most sick cases to a busy GP where you get everything. And now to really an integrative practice with a pretty heavy holistic and preventive focus and how different that is. So I often look back and think on that as well. And I think I needed to have all parts of the journey. And I still don't know what the next chapter looks like, right?
You commented that it was within a couple of years of practicing where you saw cases that weren't getting better, and you, back to the 7-year-old who's like, does it have to be this way? There has to be another way. That you're like, there has to be other options. Do you mind backing up just a little bit more and going through those moments of, and maybe it was a particular case, but like seeing these cases where it made you think there has to be other options and you started exploring that?
Yeah, the first case that broke me was a couple of years into my career as a vet. I've been seeing this dog named Lucy. She was a black lab, and I loved her. She was one of those dogs that was happy to see everybody, had so much love, and you just, those dogs that walks in, you just want to give them a hug, and they want to give you a hug, and it's like a whole body love. And so I was seeing her for a couple years on and off, and when she got older, she started having arthritis, and I put her on pain medications, and she was better for a little while, but she continued to deteriorate. And one day, mom came in with her, and basically we sat and had that quality of life discussion because Lucy really couldn't get up anymore. She was painful. Medication wasn't helping a whole lot. Plus, she was having side effects from that already. So you couldn't really just add more drugs. Like, I think her liver values were starting to get high, things like that. So I really felt that my hands were tied. And also, yes, she was in pain. And within the tools that were available to me at that time, I didn't have anything else that could really improve her quality of life. So we did make the decision together to let her go. I remember I was crying during that appointment, and it affected me for a really long time because I felt she had more to her life than, compromising from arthritis. And that was the case that made me determine that I had to look into other options, that it wasn't going to be just because I ran out of medications to give her that I had to use an isoped, especially for arthritis. So I would say arthritis was the case that got me started interested in looking at things outside of the conventional toolbox that I've been given, and acupuncture was the first thing that I learned. And I was pretty skeptical in the beginning. Even though I grew up in a culture that, is where the Chinese medicine came from. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon. So I grew up in a very Western minded family. And that was me my whole life. Like we would kind of hear about Chinese medicine every now and then. And sometimes I take some Chinese medicine, but nothing that was like a main part of my life. So I remember that, hey, what else is available? And I have heard some stuff about acupuncture. There was another doctor in my practice at that time that did that for her patients. And I did see some good results. And so I wondered, right? And I just wondered. So I'm like, hey, I talked to my job at the time and said, hey, I'm interested in this training, and really grateful they actually pay for that education. Got my certification, and I just started putting needles into everybody, literally every case I walked in. The first case, though, is that dog that couldn't get up for weeks from arthritis. And I told mom, like, hey, we don't have anything to lose. Could I do an acupuncture session? And let's just see. I did a session. And 10 minutes later, we got up. And she walked out of the clinic. And mom said, oh my God, like she's not been able to get up for a few weeks. And I thought, okay, even if I didn't completely understand the science behind it, because this is 15 years ago, and I think at that time it was still kind of maybe quackery to do something like acupuncture. Like, hey, it has no side effect, and why not? So, and that opened up the door for me doing more of those modalities. And from there, I started doing more training in herbal therapy along with acupuncture, and started seeing those cases where medicine didn't work, or it couldn't work, or for one or the other reasons we couldn't just keep them on medicine forever, that I felt that acupuncture and herbal medicine made a huge difference in many of these patients. So by the time, I started realizing that, and it wasn't, I would say that case that got up and walked away was the first case that really taught me, yes, this can work. And I would say doing acupuncture and herbal therapy, it does matter that practitioner's experience. So meaning that I'm probably much more successful now than I used to be 50 years ago. Because there are certain things that I learned along the way. But probably since then, every year I would learn a new modality. And I still do probably like 2 or 3 training classes now. Every year I would get a new certification, look into a new modality. And I'm always amazed at how much is out there that we've not tapped into yet. In that case, I always talk about Lucy because I think without her, I may not have started looking outside the box. I'm really grateful for also those owners, those pet owners in the beginning that let me do acupuncture, all of their pets, even though I was telling them, like, hey, I just started, I'm just learning. Are you okay if we do an acupuncture session? I'm always grateful for all the people that said yes, and grateful for those animals that, let me practice, and grateful for everything that they taught me. I think it's one of those things once you see, you cannot unsee it. And once I started this journey and saw the animals getting better, I couldn't unlearn, right? And fast forward to today, where the kind of medicine I practice is really root based rather than symptom based. I think there is this beautiful world where we can use our conventional medicine to help with symptoms, help them feel better, get us time. But if it's a chronic disease, we can lean into some of the integrative tools to help address what caused this in the first place. And I think that's what's missing early in my career is I didn't look at, I will take a disease and I would give a drug to make this disease better, but I didn't go back and look at, okay, what caused it in the first place? Was the microbiome that had issues? Was it a deficiency in the body? Was it chronic inflammation? Because without those things being addressed, the disease would progress no matter what. So I think that's one of the most important things that I learned early on. And sorry, a really long answer to how I got started.
Well, I think what made me so excited listening to your story when we first spoke and you started talking about that now you really actually see, in quotes, sick patients anymore because you focus so much on a more preventative strategy with pet owners who are more than open to talking about prevention. I think this is a good time because one, pet owners absolutely love their pets. They want to do what's best for them. And I think we're kind of in a movement in human health too, where we're talking more about this, that it's an easy translation to go over to talking about it for pets too. So it's not like you're having to convince them from, complete scratch. Although I'm sure people are wondering, like, how in the world do you convince pet parents to do some of these things in a preventative strategy than the, okay, I'm not going to come into the vet until they're at the very end. And now we
Mhm.
feel like we don't have a lot to offer. So as you were starting to do more and more, learn more and more, and now you're at a point where most of your patients are coming in healthy to do a more root cause wellness based versus band-aid approach the end, like how did you learn to communicate and get pet parents on board with this too?
I think the conversations now are a lot easier because what you said, that people are more aware of that there's symptom management and there is roots healing. Like if we don't find the cause, this will progress. And many of them have experienced that themselves, right? Whether it's they have a dog that's coming in for allergies, right? And they are on this drug, they've been on this drug for years, and they start to question, hey, does my dog need to take this for the rest of his life? And sometimes they start to see side effects. And many of them that's had pets before have been in that cycle. So it's becoming a little bit easier for that conversation of me saying, hey, I know that, especially if they're young, they're going to be able to handle being on some chronic medications, but we really need to step back and think about what else could happen to the body. Because some of the most serious issues later on in life are cancer being one of the most important things is rooted in inflammation and immune dysfunction. And most of the diseases that we see early on in life are also rooted in inflammation, immune issues. So it's easy to draw that parallel for parents and say, hey, we can manage this, but if the underlying issue isn't resolved, there will likely be other things that's going to come up in the future. So why don't we invest some of our time and resources to see what we can prevent so that we're saving ourselves as much heartache as possible down the road. And I think that really resonate when we have the time and the bandwidth to sit down and also to find out from them what are the most important things for them. And I think the most important thing I learned is that I could never do this in a 20-minute appointment anymore, right? So most of the time, it is at least an hour conversation in the beginning to figure out when they come in for appointments, to figure out for this family, what do they care about? What's their lifestyle? What do they want? And then talk about what are some of the strategies preventively that we can implement. And I would say that I also switched the way I practice as well. Earlier in my career, it was very one-sided that pets would come in, they would be dealing with this issue. And I would already have recommendation treatment plans formed in my mind. It's like it's ABC, right? But these days, I go into every appointment pretty open-minded and have a conversation first about them and why are they here? What are they looking for? And also, what can they realistically do? And then being able to talk to them about options. Many of them would come with ideas already. I think we live in an age where information is very accessible. So I would say my clients these days, because they are more integrative minded, many of them already come with what they want to work on and what are the things that are important to them. So it's easy to look at things from that angle and be a partner rather than telling them what to do. And I think that's the most important mind shift for me is instead of coming in as I'm the doctor, I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm working very collaboratively with the family in front of me and say, what are the most important things to you right now? What can I offer? And what do you think of these treatment modalities or these testing? And just go over why we do them and what information we can gain. So I would say a lot of them now, if they're coming in for preventive, we're looking at the microbiome, I'm looking at vitamins, minerals, I'm looking at toxins because that actually surprisingly has been one of the most important things that's come up a lot is toxic buildup. And I learned nothing about that in med school, right? But I've also learned that when I start to get the body healthy, whether it's addressing the microbiome or helping them with deficiencies or detoxing or helping the immune system reset, that a lot of the symptoms or the diseases they're dealing with, they just start to disappear on their own. And that's always a really, really cool thing to see. So now I can lean on those experiences and make those conversations easier too, because I can tell them stories about pets that, we found different things and really by healing the body from a roof base lens that they just get better. And I lean into a lot of our cancer patients too. We do see a lot of cancer patients. And I can say with confidence that being able to integrate holistic modalities along with conventional modalities I would say most of them beat their prognosis by a lot. And that's been a very important change of perception for myself, my team, and also people that we talk with. And actually, oncologists in our community as well, because now we start to get referrals. I think in the beginning, they are also very skeptical, which I understand. But I always want to work alongside. I tell our families that it's a veterinary care team. I actually encourage everybody, like all of our clients here, to have doctors. Like you should have a conventional doctor, you should have specialists, you should know where your emergency hospital is because not one doctor can do all the things all the time. So I tell all my clients, you should have a veterinary care team. And I try to work within that mindset as well. Is a lot of times we are their kind of their home base to put all this information together so they're not lost. But at the same time, we're supporting everyone else with their work. So I come back to our cancer patients because those are the patients that are often given sometimes very grave prognosis. And it's amazing to be able to see them live way, way past their prognosis and having a great quality of life. So that's been a very important part of my work.
Vet school was a while for me too, but I kind of feel like, and I think human medicine does this too, they give you the worst case scenario. If you look at the research, dogs with this type of cancer have 2 weeks to 2 years. And so they give, I'm exaggerating, but sometimes when you maybe practice with that kind of mindset, give the worst case scenario, and it's just a very different perspective. And you come across as not being dishonest, but at least offering options. And you know that you much more enjoy what you do today, focusing more on preventative and being option than you did than years ago. And so, just to kind of emphasize how your career can evolve and change, and you're at a place where you're really appreciating what you get to do every single day, I think is really where I want to emphasize this point is leaning into what you're seeing as fulfilling and working.
Yeah, absolutely. I like everyone's veterinary journey is a little different, right? I think I always say this is that I'm always curious, right? What will happen in a year? Because most often when I look back from a year ago, I'm doing something now that I never thought I would be doing, like even just a year ago. And that's the really cool thing about this career is that there's so much that's possible, right, in the veterinary field, and so much that can help an animal heal. And I get so excited by that possibility. And every day just being able to wake up and say, I wonder what I'm going to learn, right? And being able to look back, usually at the year end to that year, and say, wow, I'm doing, these are the things that I did that I didn't even know was going to come up on my radar. So I don't know, Megan. I'm sure you feel the same way. Is that I think when you were saying that people usually give the worst case scenario, I lived that period in my career as well. And I think it's very fear based, right? It's about that, okay, you don't want to give people false hope. You don't want to overpromise when you come up with a very scary diagnosis. And you don't want to tell them their animal's going to be fine because sometimes you're not going to be, but you do know that you're going to try your best. And I think one of the most important thing that I learned was that to not be so scared of something that's not here at this moment. I think we can be realistic, but we can also just be in the present. Meaning, not a lot of people have anticipatory grief already because if you give them a diagnosis, they're already thinking about how their animals might suffer and pass away, right? And I always have to remind them and myself, it's like, but look at your pet today. And many of them don't know they have this diagnosis and not feeling terrible today. And I've had more animals thriving with cancer than animals that are, going through really, really aggressive treatments and having side effects and feeling sick and still compromised. I think I'm at the point in my journey where there's not one right answer. There's not one protocol for every disease and every situation, every family. I'm looking at that pet and say, what is the most important thing? And when you ask people, they always say, we just don't want our animals to suffer. And based on that, I think we got to make different decisions sometimes. It isn't always going to be about getting the most aggressive protocols so you can try to cure this disease, because many of those animals don't do well on those protocols. So I think it's important to have that conversation and say, is it possible that they're given the best quality of life? And then one day they're going to tell us that, their body isn't going to be able to do this anymore. But I'm not going to decide for them if it's going to be 2 weeks, 2 months. Right? Like, that's not my job. My job is to make sure that every day this animal is alive, that they have the best life possible. And what can we do to make sure that happens? So I think it's a very different mindset these days. And that it makes those conversations, I think, a little easier, because I also think that people need to hear, and they need the reminder that just because an animal has a diagnosis, it does not mean that they are just that diagnosis. I think it's very important that we get out of the mindset that they are the diagnosis, because as you know, like, you can have lymphoma, and some pets, yes, they may be really sick and they may die within 2 weeks, but there are pets that are living 2, 3, 4 years beyond that diagnosis as well. So
I think just even having that more open mindset, the present mindset, and just listening to how, the reason why you're like, oh, I can only imagine in a year what's going to happen, where I'm going to be, is because you also have all of that mindset plus that growth mindset where you're constantly learning. And so I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the course that you have around the microbiome and fecal transplants, because it's not new, but I know a lot of people don't know much about the fecal transplant and what you're teaching. So in 5 minutes, can you very briefly share a little bit of how you discovered the microbiome and really started to perfect a particular type of protocol that now you're also teaching other veterinarians?
yeah, it started because I had a German Shepherd who was having diarrhea in the house multiple times a day.
Was this your personal dog or a patient?
No, I had a patient
Okay.
with a really big, like 130-pound German Shepherd. I was having diarrhea in the house for weeks and weeks and weeks now. And you can imagine that is not good quality of life for the people in the pet. But, he was okay. Like, he was having diarrhea, but he was doing better than Bob, who had to clean diarrhea every day. And, on and off, we have all these drugs to try, right? You cycle through like metronidazole, and then you're doing Tylosin, and then you're doing ultrasound. And then it's like, okay, intestines look inflamed. Might be IBD. Let's try some steroids and da da. And they would help for a little while, and then it wouldn't, right? And that was the first case that was, I don't know, like what, 8 years ago. And I had heard about fecal transplant. And because everything else wasn't working for this tox diarrhea, so I'm like, so we just, mom and I talked, and she's like, I'm on board, let's try it. And after one session, that was cured. To be safe, I did another one down the road just so that it doesn't come back. Um, but back then, the protocol was that you have to put them under anesthesia. It was this 30-minute protocol, and you rotate them like every 10 minutes. Like, dog's not doing anything under anesthesia except being rotated and holding that position for 10 minutes. The idea being that you want to have the material, one, not have the dog be resistant and pushing it out, and two, having some time, I think, to coat. And because I had such a good response, I wanted to try again, but I felt that people were most resistant to the idea of the animal undergoing anesthesia. So I started trying sedation, and I tried to try like different volumes because too large of a volume, the colon just can't really hold in most of it. So the early days was a giant mess, like poop everywhere. Yeah. Even with sedation. And there are actually many pets that probably weren't good candidates for sedation either. So, and that's when I think I spent a good 5 or 6 years figuring out like, how can I use this therapy? And I have started diving into research, and it's amazing. I'm sure everyone by now knows how important the microbiome is and how amazing it is if we can normalize and optimize the microbiome. So we have so many tools now we can do testing, and based on the testing, then we can guide them through different like nutritional strategies, supplements, all of these things, and doing fecal transplants, whether it's oral or rectal, so many different options. And I eventually figured out my own method of being able to take a pet completely awake, no special prep, and infuse a volume that works for that pet, for their comfort, for them retaining the material and going home and not have any accidents. And so I developed protocol biobalance, and that's really the thing I'm putting out in the world because of I can we can probably sit here and talk for days about all the miraculous cases that come in, not just diarrhea cases anymore, right? A lot of the things were things I was taught were not curable, right? I would say allergies, the big one on my mind. I was taught early on in my career, like you cannot cure allergies because it's an immune system issues and you can manage it, it can suppress the symptoms, but you cannot cure it. I can tell you that's not true. We've cured a lot of pets with allergy issues. And to me, that was a game changer because it really revolutionized the way that I saw cases. And from there, we had a lot of chronic issues, anything ranging from immune-mediated diseases to GI issues to heart disease to kidney disease, liver issues, and of course, cancer cases that I find that by just getting their microbiome better. And a lot of times it is through fecal transplant because it is one of the fastest ways to be able to introduce good microbiome that these animals given like a complete new life. And I just want that to be in the hands of more practitioners. And that's the whole idea behind developing a course, is that I think many people know how important the microbiome is, but most don't know that there is a way to do this therapy with minimal trauma, actually no trauma really, but it does require, I tell people it's kind of like getting a temperature through like a rectal thermometer. So minimal trauma, I guess, really quick, like usually each visit's like less than 10 minutes. We can finish like a fecal transplant procedure and really, really amazing outcomes, really happy clients. And I feel that for these animals that's been on chronic medications that's been able to get off it, I've seen too many to just keep it in my hands. So that's the heart of putting out the course, is to have more veterinary professionals be able to at least have a starting point. Like they don't have to adopt my protocol, but I want to offer it as a way that's been successful in my hands. And then they can adapt it to their own practices, their hands, and see what works for them, right? I finished my first class earlier this year, and it's really incredible to hear their feedback and the lives that they're changing. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence in continually to put this out in the world to see who else might be the right one, kind of adopt this and just at least learn a little bit more so that it's more available. I just think it's really important.
Yeah. Well, and this is a great example of the people that when they heard that you do 1 hour appointments and they're sitting in a hospital that only allows 15 to 20 minutes, this is a great example of something that you can learn and start to implement even in quick appointment time. So that as we continue to learn, and if you're like, well, what do I do in 15 minutes? And
Yeah.
these are things that you can start to learn and implement. And so I'm so glad to see you do these things and share them. And I always love to end on a final gratitude question. What is something you're very grateful for right now?
I'm really grateful for health. Really grateful for, honestly, there are many things in life now that I feel that I have to have. Um, some of the things in my younger self that I would chase are more materialistic. And these days, just being able to get a good night's sleep, wake up healthy, feeling good. Really, I was on the vacation for 2 weeks. And then, last night, Sunday night, I was really energized to come back to work. I was really looking forward. And I wrote in my journal that, gosh, what a switch, right? Because I think there have been periods in my life where I wouldn't have that. On Sunday night, I would dread having to come back and to a very busy week. And I'm really grateful to have the energy and the health to do it. When I say health, I mean physical and mental. I think that's important. I'm gonna be really grateful for that.
A 7-year-old girl in Taiwan asked whether it had to feel this way. Decades later, Dr. Lily Chen is living proof that when we stay curious, keep learning, and commit to the kind of medicine that lights us up, the answer is that it can feel even better than we imagined. If this conversation left you thinking about what it would feel like to wake up and genuinely be excited for the week ahead, I hope you'll hold on to that feeling and ask yourself what it would take to get there. If you're curious about integrative medicine or fecal microbiome transplants, or fecal transplants, if you're curious about integrative medicine or fecal transplants in veterinary medicine, links to connect with Dr. Lily and learn more are in the show notes. For a full summary of the key takeaways from today and to know how to apply it to you specifically, head over to the Sprinkle of Wisdom Substack for the Podcast Club Guide. If you appreciate the podcast, please subscribe and share it with someone in your life who needs a reminder that veterinary medicine can feel this amazing. Until next time, keep reimagining what's possible in veterinary life.